Today it will be sunny to partly cloudy and hot with a high of 92. I'm meteorologist Jason Caterina on AM 560, The Answer.
Get the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
AM 560, The Answer, Chicago's Morning Answer. Chris Crock in. Dan's back on Monday. 312-642-5600 is our number. 312-642-5600. The big, beautiful bill, if you want to call it that, of course. Others don't want to, not so much, etc. There's so much to ask about this. It's such a freaking behemoth, and I know I've read a lot, and I still have lots of questions, and that's why Phil Kerpen, hopefully I'm pronouncing his name right there, Phil. I got that right, my friend?
You got it, Phil Kerpen.
Woo!
Thanks.
Yeah, baby. President of the American Commitment and principal of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. I like that. All I know is I usually tend to agree with everything you guys say. Typically.
Thank you.
That's a good way to start the conversation.
Wait a second. You haven't read all 887 pages of the Senate version yet? It's been out almost the whole day now.
I did last night. I didn't go to sleep. And it's been on all day, yes. And then I slept with it. The pages were everywhere, but I did read it in preparation for our interview this morning.
Very good.
So first of all, you correct me if I'm wrong on this. The Senate passed it, it eked it out, and then now it goes for the House. But in the House, it may or may not even. It's like one person, two people, and then it's all. And then they may redo it. Some people are trying to already undermine it. The guy from Tennessee, I forget what his name is, a congressman from Tennessee. I usually like what he says. Can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's Ogle, isn't it?
Andy Ogles, maybe.
Yeah, Andy Ogle. That's it. Yeah.
He usually has something good to say.
Yeah, he's great. But he said something, there's one little thing he doesn't like, and so the whole thing might, he might try to derail or file some motion. Where are we at? And then is it possible that it could pass the House today or tomorrow, or what are we looking at?
Well, I think that the Speaker and the President would prefer if the House just passed what the Senate produced, and we don't have another round of back and forth, because that's the fastest and simplest way from here to the signing ceremony at the White House on July 4th that the President wants. Whether that's possible, I don't know. I mean, I think that, on balance, it's a pretty good bill. It does the most important thing, which is canceling a $4 trillion tax hike that's going to hammer every American taxpayer come January 1st if they do nothing, which, by the way, every Democrat seems fine with that, because they vote against every single version of the bill, and they haven't introduced their own. So you kind of think, wait a second, so they actually want all our taxes to go up. But there's a lot of other good stuff in here, and, there's some not as good things. And I think the question that House conservatives will have to deal with is, if we vote against this or threaten to and stop it from moving quickly, will the bill plausibly get better, or is this the best thing that the Senate can bear, and therefore sending it back will only make it worse or make it collapse completely, or, make them give up and cut some horrible deal with Democrats? And that is, I don't know the answer. This is like game theory stuff at this point. I don't know. I don't know if it can be approved. The one thing that I would really like to see them remove is this last-minute provision that, the green energy lobbyists got slipped into the Senate bill that really undermines one of the key provisions that House conservatives fought so hard for, which is this idea that there's going to be a real cutoff.
Is this the solar and wind tax thing?
Yeah, so the language that the House guys fought so hard for, and that was in the Senate bill and is still in the Senate bill, was language that says if your facility is not in service by the end of 2027, actually producing electricity by the end of 2027, it can't qualify for subsidies. And, that is a really good cutoff to make sure that all these subsidies actually go away while Trump's still there, and you're not going to, it's not going to be another one of these things where it gets extended forever. Well, at the last second in the Senate, they put in a provision that says, if you are, quote unquote, in construction, then you get an extra 4 years.
If you're constructing the project now.
Right. But the problem with that is that has a definition that is almost, it's almost trivial to meet the definition of in construction. This is one of the problems we've had historically with these subsidies. The way the IRS defines in construction is that you've raised 5% of the funds.
Oh, that's ridiculous. Yeah, we got a guy with a hammer over there. He just picked up a hammer.
It's ridiculous. So basically, they still have that 2027 in production language in there, but it's totally undercut by this other paragraph they slipped in that says, hey, it has to be in production by 2027, unless it's under construction, which everybody can qualify for. Then you get 4 extra years, and so that's really bad. So I'm hoping they can remove that, and I would like to see that happen now. You got to ask now, were there senators that said, I can't vote for the bill unless you slip this in there? And, do we have a problem getting it back through the Senate if that comes out, in which case maybe we have to live with that horrible provision? I don't know. But I would definitely like to see that change. But on the whole, there's a lot of really good stuff in here. There is. And they were able to add back school choice provisions. They were able to add back HSA expansions. There's a lot of stuff. Although you're not going to like this news on the school choice provisions, because this might be really bad for your state. The original House version created school choice scholarships in all 50 states. The Senate version, states have to opt in to.
Oh, yeah, that's never going to happen here.
Yeah,
Dick Durbin just
the thing is, you can really, I think we can really shame the states that don't do it, though, because we can say you're basically leaving federal tax credit dollars on the table.
You can't shame you can't shame J.B. Pritzker or Dick Durbin. You can't shame them. Yeah.
So I hate that they did that. I mean, that really, I was thinking we're going to get scholarships in all 50 states, and now obviously we won't. So that was a little bit of a disappointment for sure.
Here's what I want to ask you, if I may, Phil. Phil Kerpen, president of the American Commitment and principal of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. Real fast, if I may, and I know you got a lot more on the big beautiful bill and where it's at and what. This is so. I think I got this right. The Wall Street Journal has an editorial they had 2 days ago, "The Great Budget Baseline Con," and basically saying, it's going to increase the deficit by $3.3 trillion. No, they say that's only if you assume Congress was going to tolerate a $4.5 trillion tax increase, which only would happen if the tax cuts expire by the end of this year. And the way the CBO scores this is they don't count as if the law continues on past this year, which it will when this gets passed. They only count it as in it ends this year, and therefore it's going to. So basically, what I'm saying is, does it add $4.5 trillion or $3.5 trillion or any of that, or is it revenue neutral? Talk to me.
Well, I think this bill will actually reduce deficits, and I think it will reduce deficits pretty substantially if you think that it's a bad thing to let these tax hikes hit full force. And, the Democrats seem to actually want a $4 trillion plus tax hike come January 1st. And I think that the right way to think about this is the way that Republicans in the Senate are thinking about it, because if the tax rates have been what they've been since 2017 and everyone's used to them and then letting them go up is a tax hike. That's how everybody thinks about it. That's how everybody would experience it. And so this idea that, we should act as if this tax hike is going to happen and therefore preventing it as a new tax cut and we have to pay for it, I think that's totally wrong and backwards. That's not the way anybody actually thinks about this. And so I do agree with what they're doing in terms of the baseline. But I also think, the biggest variable by far in the federal budget picture is economic growth. And the current CBO forecast has 1.7% economic growth, anemic. And I believe, based on what we saw under Trump in his first 3 years before he, went haywire and put Birx and Fauci in charge of the country, but when he was actually running things and doing his policies, we had really robust economic growth and really robust income growth. In fact, I think the median income his first 3 years was up like $6,000. It was up more in those 3 years than it been up the whole century to date at that point.
Yes.
So, let's do the deregulation. Let's do the energy. We've got the border under control now. Let's get tax policy solid, especially on the business side, and get incentives for investment, get a lot of that capital off the sidelines, get the growth rate up, and the federal budget picture will improve dramatically. And I think that's the way the president's thinking about it also. If you look at what he wrote on Truth Social, where he said, look, go for growth, growth, growth. I think that's exactly right.
So here's another question for you, Phil. This was a separate editorial from a few days, June 26th, about those millions losing Medicaid. Now, Democrats claim that 7.8 million or some odd million are going to be cut off of Medicaid with this bill. And the Journal goes through and tells us what these numbers really are. And you total it up, and it comes to that number, basically. They say a few things. 4.8 million are uninsured because they're, and I'll just say it, bums. They are able-bodied and refuse to work. They're 20 hours a week or volunteer 20-hour a week. In fact, the American Enterprise Institute says the most common activity for these bums is sleeping. After sleeping is watching TV and playing video games, spending 4.2, not 4.1 hours per day watching TV and playing video games, or 125 hours in a 30-day month. So that's 4.8 million of bums, basically, is what I call them. And then another 1.4 million of illegals, and then 1.6 million subsidized cover. They could go to Obamacare instead. So why am I paying your Medicaid where you can get Obamacare? Now, first of all, is that accurate? And second of all, I heard and I believe the 1.4 million illegals are still going to be on Medicaid. What's going on here?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, they definitely stepped up eligibility checks. They're going to be eligibility checks and audits every 6 months now. Biden had stopped eligibility checking completely in Medicaid, which is one of the reasons that Medicaid spending was up 50% during the Biden presidency, totally out of control. By the way, did you know that New York State in just this past year, their federal Medicaid draw was up 21% in 1 year?
Is that the illegals?
Every scam in the book, and it's I mean, they're supposedly not covering illegals with federal money, but what California and New York do is they use various scams to turn to turn federal money into state money, basically through various money laundering alchemy schemes, and then they say, hey, we're covering the illegals with our own state money, even though we just got it from the feds and laundered it, and so it's that's a big part of it, and they crack down on those schemes in this bill. In fact, the Senate bill cracked down on the money laundering schemes better than the House version because the House version grandfathered New York and California, which I found pretty obscene. The Senate version phases out their schemes, phases it down over time. And so, look, I don't know the exact numbers, but, there are other categories that you didn't even mention there that are pretty ridiculous.
But the illegals are still going to get Medicaid then?
Well, what they said is they said you can't they were going to cut off like emergency services. Like an illegal, has shows up at a hospital with some emergency situation. They've got to cover them. They were going to say Medicaid dollars don't have to pay for that. And the parliamentarian said they couldn't do that.
That's right. Okay,
for
go
regular
ahead.
coverage, non-emergency, they are going to be cut off and they are going to do eligibility checks and so forth.
That's good. All right, what do you got?
So the other thing is, we've got millions of people that are enrolled in two different states' Medicaid plans.
Yes.
Medicaid managed care providers collecting for the same person in two different states. The other thing is a lot of these people who are signed up for Medicaid, especially younger people, a lot of them don't even use health care. They're just signed up because some broker signed them up, some insurance company signed them up just as a way to farm federal money. And, so the other thing is, with the work requirements, why I think they're so valuable, you've also got people that are working, right? But they're working off the book somewhere, working for cash, and they're also getting every government program you can imagine by pretending they don't have any income. And so if you require people to be somewhere and to work or to volunteer or to be in job training, now all the people that are working off the books while they're getting food stamps and Medicaid and housing vouchers and everything else, now they can't do that, right? Because they're going to have to account for their time. And so I think that's going to be a really, really big positive also in cracking down on a lot of the abuses that's in these programs. But I mean, the main thing to me on the Medicaid stuff, and this is what people need to why is it that when you've had a program that's grown completely out of control? Like I said, New York just increased their federal draw 21% in 1 year. We know under Biden, overall Medicaid federal spending was up over 50% in 4 years. This bill doesn't even decrease it. I wish it did because it just had this crazy increase. Overall Medicaid spending under this bill grows about 3% a year going forward. And they're saying, oh, my God, this is the end of the world. This is a disaster. This is vicious, terrible cuts and all this kind of stuff. And you're like, this Medicaid spending is still much higher under this bill than it would have been on the trajectory it was on before Biden by a lot. This just slightly bends down this curve that's been going almost straight up. And you look at what's getting more expensive in our society. The number one thing that's growing in cost is hospital prices. They've been going vertical for the last couple of decades, even worse than college tuition. So if you just shovel unlimited money at something with no eligibility checks, you just drive the price of everything up. It's only been great for hospital administrators. It hasn't been great for anyone else, really. And, I think that, and the hospitals put the rural hospitals out front, which is like 2% of hospital spending. They said, oh, my God, you're going to kill the rural hospitals. So they put up $50 billion.
You're killing people. Yes.
They put a $50 billion bailout in this bill just for rural hospitals to stop that talking point. I mean, this is, but I think one of the smartest things they did in this bill that got very little attention is they said that hospital payments in Medicaid cannot be higher than they are in Medicare, because what a lot of states have been doing, the way these scams work in a lot of states, what they've been doing is they go to the hospitals and they say, hey, we're going to put a tax on you to draw down a massive amount of federal matching funds, and then we'll give the money back to you, like charge us double or triple for Medicaid patients what we pay for a Medicare patient. That's how we'll shovel the money back to you, and more. Okay, that's horrendous. Not only does it rip off federal taxpayers, but it means that that hospitals make more money treating people on Medicaid who didn't pay in, who didn't earn it, than they do seniors on Medicare who paid into it their whole life. So this bill phases down, it phases in over a few years a cap on Medicaid payments to hospitals. They can't be more than Medicare payments. And that's going to stop a lot of the shenanigans, because if you can't, the hospitals can't just put up the money via tax to get a massive amount of federal money, and then you hand it right back to them as a state-directed payment if the state-directed payments are capped. And so I think that provision, which hasn't got a whole lot of attention, is a very, very powerful and important one. And I don't think. The Democrats never really get into specifics, right? They say, oh, my God, Medicaid cuts. Oh, my God, Medicaid cuts.
Right.
Like, ask a Democrat, why should Medicaid be paying more to hospitals than Medicare? Like, why was that okay? Why should Medicaid be paying 2 or 3 times in some cases what Medicare pays?
Phil, I got a couple more real quick questions because we've got about a minute left. I wanted to ask you this few things. Number one, the focus now shifting to the House. What do you think's going down here? What's the timeline? And do you think with such a narrow margin, we got literally 8-vote margin that we're in control, the chamber Republicans are, what do you see happening and where do you see it happening? Because this seems like it also is like hanging on by a thread.
Well, look, the House leadership was very involved in this bill moving through the Senate with the hope that they could pass it directly in the House and there wouldn't be more back and forth. And I think that's why you see, they did do the $40,000 state and local tax deduction, which is pretty obscene, but, it's what their members from New York and California and New Jersey were demanding in the House. And the Senate, the only difference they ended up with is that they do it for 4 years instead of 10 years. But, we know after 4 years they'll extend it again.
Yep.
So it's not that big a difference if we're honest. So they put that in there. That is supposed to get the House moderates and more liberal Republicans on board. And then the theory from the speaker, I think, was that you get the conservatives on board by being aggressive on repealing, all the green energy subsidies, the wind and solar and electric vehicle giveaways, which is why there's this potential speed bump now. What I mentioned, that provision that was slipped in, that loophole that was slipped in, if House conservatives get pretty angry about that, you might need to see another Senate vote to take that out. So we'll see. I mean, I think that to me right now looks like the biggest stumbling block to this moving through. But maybe it's explained to them that there's no way to get it through the Senate without that, and maybe they swallow it. I don't know, but that provision I think is the thing to watch right now.
Phil, I want to also just say this on our way out. Phil Kerpen, the president of American Commitment and Principle of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. My favorite thing that made me laugh my butt off out loud sitting in my studio last night late, burning the candle at both ends before I go to bed, is the Wall Street Journal today or yesterday, the Alaskan extraction.
Unbelievable.
This is great. This is great.
He's the last total shameless old-time politician who's just like, look, if you want my vote, this is the crap I need. I mean,
Lisa Murkowski.
Alaskan native boat captains get $50,000 of tax-exempt income.
You stole my thunder.
She just has like a list in her back pocket. And by the way, if you're as outraged as I am about all the ridiculous Alaska provisions in here, the guy to blame is Tom Tillis from North Carolina, because Murkowski wasn't going to vote for this bill and it was going to pass. And then Tillis decides, oh, no, I'm a no vote. And now they have to go to Murkowski and say, give us your ransom list.
Yes, here it is, requiring a minimum of 6 offshore leases, which I think is great, in Alaska between 2026 and 2032. And they'll receive 70% of the royalties from the production. But $50,000, this is what made me laugh so hard. You already mentioned, you stole it from me. $50,000 in charitable deduction for the expenses of whaling boat captains. Ahoy, matey!
Right. I didn't know there were enough of those to be a constituency worth getting a tax benefit for it.
Phil, I'm going to leave after the show today. I'm going to go be a whaleboat captain for a day and make $50,000. I appreciate you coming. Here I go to fight Moby Dick. Phil, I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you for all the work you guys do at the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. Have a wonderful day, sir.
All right. Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you very much. All right, so coming up, two things. We're going to get into Puff Daddy. I don't like calling him Diddy, whatever. But it's such a stupid name. But why did he have in the sketch artist for the federal courts where you can't go in there with cameras? Why did he have massive bug eyes? The oh bleep look, as his lawyers were surrounding him yesterday. How bleeped is Puff Daddy, aka Diddy? And then 7:37, we're going to talk to a Wyoming billionaire who's going to give us all money. No, I'm just kidding. He is trying to buy TikTok, and he has a very decent chance at it. All that coming up next. It's Chris Kroc filling in on Chicago's Morning Answer. Dan back Monday on AM 560, The Answer.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
This is a special alert during this window replacement season. Don't get tricked by the cheapest offers and gimmicky ads.